Chapter 39 South Watch. Augustana waited and fully welcomed the bulk of the witches' forces. It wouldn't be long before they readied their strike. The strongest defense the witches had should have been to the south, but as far as what she saw, the forces were spread thin, making a perimeter that the witches wouldn't be able to escape. They were more worried about witches escaping than losing the battle as a whole. She supposed that was fine, since victory was in their favor. She waited quietly for the witches to make their move. For the first hour there was quiet. The encirclement had begun. It wouldn't be long before the infiltration team went to hunt Isadora. In the meantime, she kept her eyes open. Sai and Mina waited. Both of them were nervous, and their eyes flicked from one place to another. They had seen the horrors of witches and experienced a day of them. They were overly anxious. Augustana smiled and comforted them. "It's all right. You'll be fine. Both of you." She was confident enough where they might actually believe it. Sai was curious. "Darius gave you command. What's your history with him and Meridus? Have you fought with them before?" Unlike Meridus, Augustana hid very little. "We were comrades during the time of war. I was told if I joined them, I would change the world for the better until I decided to leave. I have been through many battles with them. They learned to trust me for a time. Meridus is strong and reliable. Darius is capable and fierce. Scipio is surprisingly gentle and wise. I was with them before any of us were known very well. Before Darius was known as Darius the Immortal. He has never lost a battle he commanded, nor has he ever been injured. We are with him from the very beginning, and he seems to think we are part of his luck. I agree with him. Meridus pretends not to care, but he does. He came from the land of iron, taking the first job in the Shing military he could. He has been with Darius as long as I have." Mina smiled brightly. "You really respect them, don't you?" Augustana chuckled slightly. "It's strange. They always claimed I was the greatest at combat, but yet I never imagined I would beat them. I respect them." Mina was a little curious. "Have you ever, Augustana smiled and kept her face composed. "No, I am a paladin, although I have had my temptations. There are times I am envious of women who can simply be honest and say when they want something or someone. There have been times I wished Meridus were mine, and there have been others where I wish I think better of it. I'd felt the same for Scipio as well, at many points of time. The truth is, I do not know how I feel, nor do I know how I might feel about such things. When you spend enough time with someone, it's only natural such things come. Surviving life-threatening events often brings two people together. It's more common they marry when that happens. Yet we've managed to stay distant for so long, I doubt anything will come of it." Sai looked to Mina, thinking of the other night. "I guess surviving stuff like that really does bring out things in people. I mean, I've done things I never knew I could." Augustana nodded. "When we are pushed, we either succeed or die. The best and worst elements of humanity are brought out when pushed. Take care of that one. I will see to it you both survive this day." Mina smiled weakly. "Well, those witches, they're pretty strong." Augustana agreed. "Yes, gods guide us, they are. But they shall fall. We have the 8 gods, and we have force enough to receive them. It falls to me to deal with whatever champions they send. Stay safe until that time. Heal the wounded and use your magic to dispel those that are under witches' control. Be it animal or man, you should attempt to set them free. It will reduce their number and save a life." Sai gulped but nodded. "There's a limit to how many spells I can break. I'll do my best." Mina started spinning and waving her arms. Water began to rise from the ground to the surface and creating a field of mud. She chanted and focused. Augustana was impressed with whatever it was she was doing. With a river and the timing of rain this season, there was plenty of water still in the ground. Mina was a water priestess, calling out water, then saying some sort of prayer over the water. Blessing it however she could, Augustana joined in, and from the men another figure joined in. All of them had some blessing for the gods. Each of them assisted the other in purifying the water, making it holy. Undead would have trouble crossing this water. Some witch magic would even be weakened passing over it. Sai was impressed at first, then something caught his attention as he sensed magic heading this direction. "Good idea, Mina. Wait, something is coming. A great number of familiars, trees, animals, and undead. A witch is leading them with her witch spawn. They'll be here soon. It looks like they're going to throw whatever they can at us." A lone witch stepped out of the wood as cries from creatures of all types let loose. It was time to begin their assault. The witch looked over, almost pleased with the fact that so many humans gathered before her. "Good. Many have come," she said, looking out at the vast gathering. They would not likely have time to form up and make their best defenses ready. She considered some traps, but had little worry. She intended to make them fall back quickly. If they all died before her, here and now, that would be best. Elizabeth the giant was even larger than before. She stepped forward and let out a yell. The beasts around her, the familiars and undead, all howled with her. Then she began to make a running start to the camp. She was hunched over by her awkward size, but it was undeniable that she was formidable. Augustana readied her blade and her armor began to shine. Her eyes flashed with power and her hair began to flutter around, leaving little sparkles of life as it shifted. "That one is mine. Defend the others." Elizabeth smiled at the glowing target. That was their leader. Of course, a warrior of light would be. Elizabeth promised herself that she would eat the paladin. She would feast upon the magic in her body and break the hope of the men who stood behind her. She raised her massive arm and slammed it down, hoping to break the footing of those before her. Mud splashed against her giant legs. The holy water was nothing to her, but the paladin would enjoy the benefit of consecrated ground. Augustana leapt into action, pushing her weapon forward as arcs of light flashed out in a sort of energy crescent. With a raised hand she called a ray of light down upon the witch and charged in. It was as if she ran on water, the way she went through the mud. The witch was not to be slowed by a little light. Her giant arm shielded her, and the force from the arcs did little against the wall of muscle. She then waved the arm at Augustana, who flipped over the large arm, striking it as it flew under her. The cut was not deep, but what appeared to be golden lightning crashed down upon the cut she made. The cut was a marker of sorts for the real damage. Augustana struck again with her blade and waved her hand on the floor, consecrating the land to be blessed. Holy ground gave paladins advantages of all sorts. With her blade she cut at the giant's belly. As before, it caused a golden strike from the sky to hit the very spot her blade did. This was no ordinary paladin. Elizabeth grunted at the realization of what she was up against. This one was a champion of a god touched. There was no telling what she did in order to gain such power. Elizabeth had a trick she intended to make use of. She tackled past the paladin, knocking her away into a sliding stop. Elizabeth went towards the gathering of men. Lances and arrows met her. She reached out and grabbed a man and bit into him, while swatting others away who tried to do her harm. She chewed the man and grew in size. The more she ate, the more she grew. The magic in his body adds to my own. His flesh shall heal my own. Her wounds closed and the burn marks seemed to heal little by little as she chewed. Augustana couldn't let this continue. She raced over to the witch and readied her blade to drive it into the witch once again. The giant arm swung at her, and in much the same way she dodged and sliced into it as she did. What the paladin did not expect was the large tackle that came after. It knocked her back, and she was swatted away yet again. The witch reached for another man to grab. This time they were gaining distance from her. It seemed she wasn't even noticing the magical bolts or arrows that hurt her as she went for another meal. Her minions were quick to join the battle, the holy water not holding them back for long. The soldiers leapt into the ranks and began to defend themselves. Shields bashed against them. Yells came from the men, and it was open war. The witch charged at Augustana again, this time slamming the ground. The smaller target danced and ignored the force of the slam. She swung the blade towards the witch, and crescents of light crashed into her face. The damage wasn't severe enough to make a difference. The witch spat blood. She looked to a brave soldier who charged towards her. The witch smiled wide. Augustana yelled out for those who got too close. "No!" It was too late. She reached and grabbed an adventurer, Morgan. She smiled and bit into him with metal teeth. The upper part of his body eaten, and then his lower. The witch grew in size and muscle. Augustana needed to end this somehow. It charged at her again. The witch was more of a beast now than anything sentient. She held up her blade to the sky and placed both hands upon the hilt. She focused, and the blade seemed to extend. Rather, the blade itself was not extending, but it shined and the light extended off it. She needed more time to do this. At last it seemed as if the holy water began to gather around the witch. The water flowed around her legs and became a globe of dense water which slowed her steps and nearly tripped the witch. Sai began casting his dispelling magic upon the witch, repeatedly using whatever he could to disrupt the flow of her spells. The witch growled and seemed to shrink with every cast. Little bits at first, but then more noticeable with time. She reached to the ground and grabbed a glob of mud and chucked it at Sai, who had to dodge. It was thrown with enough force to end him. Mina struggled to keep the witch's legs bound. The witch grabbed more mud and chucked it at Mina. It hit her hard and set her spinning to the floor. Sai cried out, "Mina!" Augustana was ready at last. The witch turned to Augustana, and her eyes widened as she watched a giant blade of light come crashing down on her face. It cut through her, but it did not truly cut her. It was as if the light went through her. Golden lightning struck down repeatedly against her, and her insides began to burn with holy energy, purifying her insides and choking the life from her. The energy inside her body was purged, and her size shrunk down to that of her usual, double the size of a normal person. Now, the arrows and lances, which did nothing before, were now not being stopped by thick muscle. Augustana ran her through and twisted her blade for the kill. The witch grabbed Augustana's face. She growled into the paladin's ear, "Those you love will abandon you, or you will abandon them. He that you love, you will bury him. You will die in solitude." Then at last the witch fell as the arrows and javelins finished the job. Augustana felt true evil flow through her. What were those words? What had happened? Sai was panicked and began rapidly attempting to dispel whatever magic Augustana had run through her body. She felt odd. What was it? A witch curse. Before they die, they can do one last curse. It's a lot stronger than normal ones. A final revenge and a defensive mechanism against killing witches. Augustana activated her holy power and attempted to purge it. Some of it left her, but it was difficult to tell what had happened. Was that it? Some parting words? Dying in solitude? What sort of a curse was that? Augustana did not yet know the meaning, but it mattered not. Perhaps there would be something that could remove it, or the gods would grant her mercy. Gods guide us, it's over. Thank the eight. She exhaled a breath, then looked to the north. The undead fell to the ground, completely motionless. "They did it! They killed Isadora," Sai said, checking, then double-checking. "The wards are down, all of them." Augustana gave the command. "Hunt them down, all of them! Move!" Wasting no time in pressing the assault. The wounded and dead were left behind. Mina was left crying on the ground. There was pain from the mud that was thrown at her, but Sai understood the real reason. Morgan was dead. Against his better judgment, he went ahead. He needed to be there to help find the remaining witches. Chapter 40. North's Folly. It happened sooner than they thought. It was already time. A number of them had already begun to gather to the north. The witches knew Isadora would fall sooner or later. They simply began their escape early, heading to the north. "Do you think they'll be able to kill Elizabeth?" Vanessa asked. Alyssa kept her bats out and in flight. She seemed to be looking all around her. "Not easily, no, but it seems they have a champion prepared to face her. With support they could end her. Eventually her magic tires out. Perhaps she could hold the line for long enough to buffet them back. We best look to our own path. It seems like a small host of men awaits us." Lilura looked at her enthralled, and they drew weapons. She gave up most of her beasts to support Elizabeth. A generous but necessary offer. Elizabeth was going to have need of whatever aid she could get. No doubt the weakest of the forces would be to the north, if any. Apparently, a small group was ahead of them. She supposed she'd have to break through. Is there a way around them? Alyssa growled. "No, even if I were to take flight, I'd probably be shot down. They have mages skilled enough to break my transformation or shoot me down. They have bowmen as well. A group is holding the perimeter to prevent escape to the north. It is a small group, but enough where I would hesitate to cross them. Wait. Others are coming. Men with blades come to us. I am having trouble seeing them. If I get too close, I cannot see through my winged ones. Best we change course." Vanessa let out a scream. "Look out!" She raised her arm to command a tree golem to stretch out its long limbs and catch a black blade before it hit Elisa. Enemies were upon them. Lilura, without words, pointed her ahead. Her enthralled obeyed her mental commands. They were armed mostly with axes, but they would do. She opened her hands to reveal what looked like spinning air. With a gesture, the wind got harsh and blew against whoever may try to launch arrows or blades. Men with black blades came charging out and made quick work of the enthralled. Even with the wind against them, they chopped at masks and in some cases made killing blows, when saving them was not possible. Vanessa called up roots to grab at their legs, easily clutching at their ankles and making easy targets for her golems. But the men sliced the roots. Even waving their blades caused the roots to stop growing. The magic in them was forced out and causing them to turn hard and brittle enough for the soldiers to escape. Alyssa let out a loud screech which boomed with such power that it would cause ears to bleed and trees to shake. The weapons didn't seem to stop sound so much as magic. The vibrating air might have been caused by magic, but their weapons did not seem to work on the harsh screech. Much to her surprise, she suddenly went quiet. She could not speak. In fact, no sound at all could be heard or said. What did this? Arundella appeared out of the trees and launched an arrow at Alyssa. An ambush? That was silencing magic. The area around them was made still to sound, whereby making it impossible to hear or communicate. All Alyssa could hear was a ringing. She tried to warn her allies, but Allura was busy casting hexes at her enemies, who were too entrenched in holding back the black arms the enemies had. Those weapons were deflecting her hexes. Alyssa tried to cry out again, but it was useless. An arrow struck Allura. She tried to cry out in pain, but the silencing magic kept her from moving. Then a fierce man in black armor took the hexes to the chest and felt no ill impact. He drove his black blade through Allura and with the same motion flicked a black blade at Vanessa, who was commanding her tree golems to smash the armed men. She did not hear the blade coming. It struck her under the armpit. She spat out blood while arrow after arrow pierced her. Alyssa looked around her in horror as she realized she was doomed if she stayed here. Allura used her own body as a shield to stop an arrow from hitting Alyssa. Although there was no sound, she mouthed the word, "Fly." Alyssa looked at Vanessa, who seemed to be breathing her last. With the last of her strength, she sent out a pulse of mental power which stunned those who surrounded her. Then, with all of her might, she poured all of her strength and life force into Alyssa. The Allura joined in and fell on Alyssa, shielding her from arrows. The Allura started pouring her magical power into Alyssa as fast as she could before the wounds finally ended her. They would have no death curse. They could not speak. This was the best they could do. They bought her a little time and filled her with as much power as they could. Alyssa gritted her teeth and fought back tears which flowed at the sight of friends dying. Shielding her from harm! Anger flared inside Alyssa. She did not have time to delay. They managed to stun the enemies with a powerful mental attack, but it wouldn't work long. She took her coat and wrapped it around herself. She changed into the form of a bat. She flew with speed she did not have before. The magical power and wind aided her. She flew back to Isadora, hoping to find some opening in the encirclement. Then she saw it. All the forces were moving in towards the center. Elizabeth was dead. Isadora was dying. Everything was lost. The tiny bat let out a screech of pain. Arrows soared past her from an impressive distance. Some damned male elf was going to shoot her down if she got any closer. She had nowhere to go. Anywhere she might try to go there was certain death. She had little choice but to go to the center of the encampment where some witches still lived. All were fleeing towards the center. She had to warn them that men with black blades were coming. They simply would not die. She had always known a witch could slay many times her number in mortals. But this was a slaughter of a different kind. There was no victory. The ward Isadora prepared made sense now. Had they all been driven mad, they might have escaped. There would have been some sort of opening. But right now, they had nothing. She landed as a bat and hid in a tree. She viewed the scene with eyes better than a bat should have. Alyssa saw Meredith rescuing Isadora's special prisoners. The Druids! Then she saw Isadora lying dead on the floor. She saw Abigail being carried by the witchblade. Anger flooded her, but she dared not reveal herself. Not now. Was this the end? Then something happened. She saw in the sky a spectral bird. One of moonlight and holding Isadora's very essence in its claws. A familiar that large, that powerful. There was no one she knew who could summon such a thing. A smile appeared as she took human form while hiding in the tree branches. The Grand Coven.